Hello and welcome to The Navigator. My name is Jack Corfield and today we'll be talking about the education program at VIU. I was homeschooled up until I went to university, and so I've always found the public education system fascinating. I remember the few times I had to step into a public school to do a standardized test. I would be walking down these big smelly hallways full of strange teens and thinking, why am I so uncomfortable here? When I was young, people would ask my parents with concern, how is Jack going to get enough social interaction? To which, if I had overheard, I would reply, you think putting nearly 2,000 kids into a box for 8 hours a day is a normal social experience? I definitely had some biased assumptions about what happened in public schools. I'd learned through my own research at a young age that things like standardized tests and grade scores were considered outdated and ineffective tools. Plus, I was my own example of how things could be done differently, so I was anything but jealous of the public school experience. Often, I would hear from my school-going friends, or from movies and books, that teachers in public schools were creatures of authority to be ridiculed, ignored, or resisted. That with few exceptions, teachers were boring, or at worst cruel. I preferred to learn on my own most of the time, but I also had tutors, and sometimes I would take after-school classes with kids from school. I always had a great relationship with my teachers, though I rarely saw them more than once a week for more than an hour or two. I knew that they, like me, were just people, and that they were trying their best to do a good job sharing their knowledge. Even now, as I work my way through university, my experience of that person who stands in front of a class lecturing and engaging their students is anything but boring. So I decided to gather some friends who are in the education program at VIU together in my new recording space to talk about what the experience of being a teacher is like, to get a better sense of what the perspective of a teacher is, and what exactly teachers are learning to be. What skills are they employing to teach students? What challenges do they face from 8 to 3, 5 days a week? Also, a quick note before we begin, we've moved the birds out of the recording space, so we'll no longer be joined by our fine-feathered audience for these interviews, but we do have a few creaky chairs in here just for the sake of that October ambiance. So if you're in a house with creaky floorboards and think someone's sneaking up behind you with a machete, you're probably fine. Okay, let's get into the interviews. Hello and welcome to The Navigator. Let's go around the circle here one by one, and would you please introduce yourselves and tell me what initially inspired you to take the ed program at VIU?
My name's Allaina. I think that what kind of inspired me to take the ed program was I never wanted to be a teacher, but then I had someone that I was very close to in high school who was a music teacher of mine, and she brought me into her classroom to, quotation marks, help in the classroom, but she didn't actually need help. She just wanted to show me that like being a teacher is what I wanted. So VIU was close and I heard good things about the program. So
it was more of an inspirational choice based on your experience rather than the school itself.
Yeah, exactly. I never really cared what school I went to for education, to be honest with you.
Allan, how about yourself?
Well, I'm Allan, and I decided to go into education. For a long time, I wanted to be a counselor rather than being a teacher, and people just kept telling me over and over again that I would make a good teacher. And after a few years of that kind of stuck, and I decided to pivot towards education instead.
Did you find some synergy in moving from one program to another?
Yeah, well, I did a lot of work with at-risk youth back when I was in high school, and I did a lot of volunteer work at that time period, and I found that that was really transferable, and I think, if I'm being completely honest, the experience I did with at-risk youth really made me want to become a teacher.
And you, Olivia?
Yeah, hi, I'm Olivia. I guess what brought me into education was it was a career change. COVID put a lot of us in a position where, out of work, searching for something else. Yeah, I was spending a lot of time at home and was kind of toying with the idea, I guess you could say an existential crisis of missing out on the university experience. And education's always been a passion of mine. I was an artistic educator with L'Oreal for a while and really enjoyed that and, being with people and learning and sharing knowledge and just some family experiences kind of led me in the direction to kind of seeing what education was like, and was suggested it by an old teacher and just went for it, applied at VIU. And
so you started in a trades, was for hairdressing?
Yeah, I was a hairstylist. So you decided mid-COVID that you're going to go into a career that's extremely public-facing with a bunch of germ-filled little children. What came into that decision? Yeah, so education's always been a bit of a passion, whether it was for myself or just, teaching other people stuff. But I also have two siblings, actually, that struggled a lot in school. And I think I was the child my parents didn't really have to worry about. But I got to, I got to help them a lot with school. And that kind of drew me towards education. the two of them had their own struggles in school. My brother in particular really struggled with school and had a really bad experience. So I think originally, actually, I wanted to go into some sort of occupational therapy or EA. And then from there, just decided a different route, really. So a bit of like personal and professional experience there kind of steered me in the direction of education.
Year by year, what is the learning curve for the ed program at VIU?
I think that in year 1 and 2, you're not very focused on the actual education part of like what you're doing. In the secondary stream, which I'm not part of the secondary stream, and they've actually like removed that from the program now, but...
Jack here, popping in to add some clarity. The secondary stream refers to the set of courses for learning how to be an educator in secondary education institutions, high schools, essentially, whereas the primary stream refers to primary schools. Okay, back to Allaina.
In the secondary stream, you do have to find teachables and taking other extracurriculars to figure out what you want to do. So knowing what you want to have and is important to you is like a good thing to have when you start the program. But then when you hit year 3, you do more of the actual theory of being a teacher. I call it the fluffy years in year 1 and 2. And then year 3 is where you're actually learning more things. And then in year 4, it's like high gear. And I'm still just entering year 4, so I think my friends on the couch here would be better at describing year 4. Yeah,
tell me about the later years.
We're both in year 5, myself and Olivia, and I think the later years, it's a lot more it's very similar to year 4, a lot of the pedagogy and a lot of the theory behind teaching. They do a lot of pedagogical stuff for each of the years, but there's a couple courses each semester that are specified. So we've done so far like drama, social studies, literacy for young children.
Yeah, year 4 really dials that in, like your curriculum pieces.
Mm-hmm. So you have those like basic building blocks for how to teach each individual course, in addition to knowing like the psychological and like pedagogical theories behind it.
Mm-hmm. For people who haven't heard the term pedagogical before, how would you define that?
Pedagogy? Oh, how would I define pedagogy? I guess just like I'm going to get ripped apart for this. I would say ways and theories and how you learn on a specific task or subject. So like a pedagogical approach to teaching, for example, like what you do, how you do it, and why you do it.
Yeah, I'd say probably something similar along the same vein. It's mainly the method and the like philosophy that you adapt towards your teaching style and the way that you approach the classroom. Yeah,
which I honestly, I would say like year 3 is really a turning point where you kind of start looking, I guess what I would say is like maybe an aim. Again, I can't speak for what the actual program is, but the way I viewed it was year 3 was a turning point where they really get you to look at, you know, what types of pedagogies or theories or practices that are out there. And then kind of getting you to really look introspectively as well about yourself as a future educator and how you're going to apply that to your own practice. So I think it's a lot of experimentation and learning new stuff in year 3 once you're out of those fluff years, as I think you called them. And that's when they really kind of get you shifted into gear. And then by year 4, it's on a lot more practical hands-on knowledge, as well as I'm sure we'll talk about. You go into your practicums and start actually getting a feel for teaching.
Mm-hmm. And you're talking about how it's a little bit different for each person at this point, right? So, and you're all in year 4 or 5. What would you say is your personal sort of brand of pedagogy then? What is this specific sort of specialization for you, Olivia?
For me, I think a big thing for me is kind of like a holistic approach to education. I think that's always kind of been the way I look at education, school, learning in general. I was lucky enough to, grow up with parents that were really, really supportive, and a failing grade wasn't a fail. It was an attempt. It was a try. And I guess one thing that's important to me is kind of the social emotional piece to learning. It's more about the experience along the way. So I think that's a big piece of pedagogy for me, is just creating those relationships and creating an environment where people actually want to learn and spend their time. You're spending 7 hours a day in a room. And I think that's kind of been a turning point, especially in the last couple of years, kind of, helping students and yourself really take care of you in the classroom. And hopefully that leads to those moments where people can, inquire about stuff and actually want to be there. and want to learn. So I think it kind of starts with that building block and then working from there, learning content.
Mm-hmm. Allan, does that differ at all from your own?
It's fairly similar. My main thing is engagement through relevancy. I think that's a big thing that struggles. We're competing with a lot as teachers in this day and age, where we have a lot of things that are grabbing our students' attention, pulling them away. Phones is going to be the hot button topic probably for the next forever. But if I don't know about other people, but personally through my educational experience, if I didn't find that the lesson was relevant or I didn't find that it was necessary, I would completely check out. A good student in other merits, but if I didn't feel I needed the information for it, I would not care. So a big part of my pedagogical ideas is to get students to care about the lesson itself and then make it relevant to their lives and where it will impact them. Nobody's going to care, no offense, about the fur trade necessarily in Canadian history, but if you give the kids the relevancy to why it's important for their day-to-day lives, if you point to them at the HBC and go to the Bay Center and be like, hey, this is first trading post in Victoria. Here's some evidence. This is actually the real life impact of it. This building was built because of this. Usually they'll tend to care a little bit more, and that's going to make them better learners.
You can still buy these at the store.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about yourself, Allaina?
I would agree with all of the points kind of brought up before. I do think that I will have a different idea of what my personal pedagogy is because I am in the elementary stream, especially young elementary, so kindergarten to 2. I think I'm still developing a lot of that because I've barely been in the schools in actual classrooms. I've worked through schools for several years now, but not actually in a learning environment. So I'm still kind of developing that. But I think what is really important for me is the relationship aspect of what you do in the classroom with the learners. Because I've found that if they don't respect you as a person, respect you, or even like you, there is so little desire that they have to listen to what you have to say or how you're trying to help them. Especially because I find so many people come into a classroom and they immediately think they should respect me, they should listen to me because I am the teacher in the room. And that's not necessarily true. Especially to a 5-year-old who's just coming in the classroom oh, I can't be at home and I can't play with my Legos or I can't play with my phones. You have to convince them that you are worthy of their attention. And I think it's really important to foster good relationships with young children in schools.
That's interesting that younger kids have less of a sense of that social structure that says this is the person at the front of the classroom and therefore they are the teacher and therefore have respect and power in the room. Right. And I think personally for me as a homeschooled kid, I never really cared much for that experience either. I kind of sit around the same level of respect for the teacher that a kid in a 5-year-old's sort of class would have. Right. And then I get to university and I found that the experience with being more social with my teacher has really helped me in a university setting. So I wanted to ask do you guys feel that there's sort of an older guard of this respect the teacher vibe that is, I think it sounds like it's quite useful in a way. I think it is useful and I think it is something that is structurally there in the classroom, but I've also heard people have an opposing view to that. Is there any discussion that you guys want to have on that topic?
I do think that it's not as prevalent in schools anymore that there is this idea that you should respect the teacher in the room, especially in the younger grades. I understand.
I can second that for secondary as well. Yeah, it's
I understand that like there is like problems with that, because then it does lead to kind of, I would say, blind trust and blindly following someone else. But I do think it is important that students know that there is a teacher in the room who has a job to do instead of just like babysitting, essentially. And I actually had one student in my practicum today who has been having some difficulties lately. I'm in a kindergarten practicum right now. He's been having some troubles climbing on tables, not really wanting to participate in the work that we're doing, and so he's unfortunately falling behind. So my host teacher had a conversation with his guardian, and my host teacher was immediately told, well, I just won't bring him to school tomorrow because you can't seem to control him. And we were like, well, that's not the solution at all in both of the things that you have said. So yeah, I do think that maybe parents are not as open to the idea of teachers being that respect figure in the classroom as they used to be.
Interesting. It's from the parents that you're noticing that particular pressure. They want something different for the way that they're being educated. Allan, you've got a face. What is that?
I tend to find that I come from a relatively poor community, and I've worked in not the most privileged of schools up until this point. And through that experience, I feel like there's a large cultural almost difference with some of the students where they just feel like it's the same kind of philosophy that you see back in the older days where it's like, why do I care? I'm just going to go work in the mines anyways and make more money than you will, teacher. And I think that kind of philosophy has just kind of grown up into a new thing where it's like, rather than going into the mines, they're just going to go do whatever else they plan to do. But I don't need to pay attention because I can just do this without the education. Or at least in secondary. I don't know how it is for elementary. I don't think that it's necessarily driven from any one source. I think it's kind of a wide combination of a lot of different factors blending together to cause kind of like a perfect mess within the classroom.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that, I will say, like, I think there has definitely been like a bit of a cultural shift. Like, it doesn't matter where you are socioeconomically, geographically. Like, I think there has been just an overall global cultural shift, especially among like teens, which Allan and I are both secondary stream. And I think it starts even from like, you know, the pivotal age of kindergarten, right? Like, you're dealing with your parents, you're dealing with the teachers, you're dealing with peers. It's hard. I haven't been in the game long enough to really kind of make a good assumption on where that shift happened. Maybe it's media, maybe it's, you know, just the world as it is, right? Maybe it's a bit to do with COVID. Yeah, like Allan said, there's lots of, you know, socioeconomic factors that could play in, family, you know, and students' own struggles as well. So I think it's hard to put like a pin in where that shift happened and why kids are the way they are. But I guess a big thing for me and just my philosophy is just remembering that everyone's a person, right? Like, we're teachers, but we're a person. They're kids, but they're a person. And I think it kind of, for me at least, that's the root of where I look at how I approach school and work. And yeah.
Like, what would you say is the relationship between an educator and a student in your profession? Like, specifically, what is your goal, that the skills that you have, that you learn in school, what are they looking to, what are you aiming to achieve in like educating a student? What's that look like, right? Like, what's your perspective on what your job is essentially?
I mean, there's a few different ways to look at it, right? Like, obviously, as an educator in British Columbia, we're held to a standard to educate. There's curricular points that we need to meet. There's curricular and core competencies that these students need to be learning. So we're learning how to deliver that, right? Through whatever subject or subjects that we're teaching. So that's an expectation. And what we're being prepared for. But I think also, like, I think a lot of us come back to that relationship piece because it is such a core component of being able to deliver a lesson, you know, the curriculum pieces. We're being prepared to actually teach the curriculum, which is outlined for us. But on top of that, like, we are also being prepared to be that cheerleader, that support person, to be a role model for all different students. You are kind of like, you kind of morph to be something for them, right? Which is a bit of a daunting feeling, I will say. You are so much more than just someone who stands up there and speaks and, you know, hopes that it sticks.
I think that the few years that I've been in the program, there have been a lot of kind of onus put on, again, relationship building, which is so integral to the profession, but also on stuff like differentiated instruction and how to reach children in the classroom who are struggling. And I do find that a lot of that information that we are taught in year 3 and even before in the prior years is important for what you do in a classroom when there is a kid who just can't be part of what you're trying to teach and does fall behind. Of course, there are scenarios where you're like, I find that going into practicum from that kind of thing is kind of like, I call it the Thunderdome, because you go from being in a classroom at VIU where you're learning all these theories, and then you go into a classroom and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, what is happening right now? But having that prior knowledge of like what you do in this scenario, or how do you de-escalate, or what do you do when a kid says something violent to you, what do you report, is important for when it actually happens in your practicums, because it'll happen.
Speaking of things happening in practicums, I had a question for Allan, particularly due to a rumor I've heard around the circle, and I want to expand this question to the rest of you too. Like, yeah, what are some of the most challenging experiences you've had in a practicum setting?
Well, for me personally, I think I'm going to say a story because I know that's the rumor that's been circulating around. During my first practicum, I had a student threaten me with a shiv, which was fairly interesting, to say the least. That was a very challenging experience. The student meant nothing by it. They thought it was a joke, but nonetheless, it was a pretty serious threat. And I don't want to say too many details about it in specifics, but navigating that situation is especially one that I never thought I would have to do, especially so early in my teaching career, like quite literally my first practicum. But honestly, what I find more challenging than particularly like violent students or students that are really, really struggling, it's finding that student that is very attentive during some periods of class, but not in others. I think like there's a difference between like a violent student, but like they are usually easy to handle. You go talk to somebody else, get somebody who's a professional at handling students that are struggling to give you an assistance on that, and you can build like a case plan for that student. But when it comes to some students, they're the students that fall through the cracks because they seem very attentive during discussions. They're actively involved in a lot of classroom discussions, and they just don't complete any of the work for whatever reason. And I found that that was my most difficult experience, is that I would be like, oh, this kid's doing just fine because they are attentive to everything, but they aren't actually doing any of the work and have completely lost any semblance of attempting to even pass the course. So, you know, violent students are one thing, but I think what we really need to be looking for is like students that just slip through.
That makes so much sense, because it's like, it's one thing to be shocked in your job. It's another thing to witness a slow and complex breakdown in communication between you and another person. That's just like deeply effective to our soul. You know, that's something we really care about as humans, is our community, and seeing somebody like, you know, withdraw like that, even if it's not in a very obvious way, when you are the person who has the sort of another level of information about a kid, because you're sitting there. This is from homework, right? Like, this is what homework is to you, is not a signal of whether or not they can add 2 + 2. It's, you're looking at whether or not a kid is like actually like able to what is what is the purpose of homework here? It's changing. It seems like this is like almost a psychological assessment tool.
Well, I think we're finding a lot more that going towards rather, like, we've moved away from like a proficiency in knowing content to a proficiency in knowing key ideas and key ways to navigate. Like, we're living in a world now where almost everything can be found, easily accessed, and replicated using digital means, whether that's like AI or just Google. And I think with the new education system, its goal is to give students the skills to be able to do things independently rather than know things necessarily. Sure, you might not know the answer to any one particular question, but you'll be able to go find that answer yourself. But where I think it's really struggling is that it's quite vague in its description of it. It's a lot harder to convey to a student, like, here's how you do proper research, and here's how you do like all these different capabilities that you need to know to be like a functional member of the world. But it's another thing to teach a kid like what a specific like date is, or a specific math equation.
Well, if I can add to that, like, I think too, it's a big struggle we're finding is the engagement part, like wanting to have kids actually engage with, like, well, why is this relevant, right? Like, that's a big question. Like, why do I need to do this? Like, especially with the secondary students, and you're seeing them for like, you know, maybe an hour and a half. So, you know, checking in on them is, all of your students can be a bit, it can be a bit hard, right? Making those connections and making sure that they're actually engaged. So like, it's hard. I find a lot of students too, especially with the proficiency scale, there's no longer the grade incentive before grade 10. And you kind of lose that trust in like, why are we doing this and what are we doing? And it's a hard thing, especially as new educators, to kind of figure out how we can get students to engage. Asking about the change in homework and stuff, and no one wants to do homework. I didn't want to do homework when I had a grade assigned, right? But it was the incentive. So like now we're stuck with this, new challenge of incentivizing students to want to engage with the content and engage with us and engage with themselves as a learner. And so I think we're kind of shifting more to like that inquiry-based piece, like wanting to get students to think about things, giving them that evidence. I think we talked about as well, like of why things are important. And where we're going to go with it. We're kind of looking at like, why is this relevant? I personally don't want to be the teacher that just hands them homework and hopes it sticks, right? So I think a lot of us, especially in this day and age, and it makes me feel quite hopeful with new educators of, we're wanting to actually educate, not just put something down and give them a grade. We want to make sure that they're meeting those, we, and I think BC Curriculum and, the Ministry of Education are actually wanting to make sure that students are engaging and inquiring further so that they can be, forward thinkers. And I could go on about that. I don't know where I'm going to go with that, but I'll leave it there.
So you guys have a lot of optimism overall, I think.
We've got a lot of pessimism too.
There's some pessimism too. Yeah. I was gonna ask. So we're talking about some difficult situations. We're talking about some big changes. Some of these look like they're pretty hopeful overall, or there's some like real sense that there can be solid quality change. But that's all a lot of work on you guys. Like as teachers, that's huge. And as you're talking about like handling many classrooms, many kids in a variety of spectrums is just as stressful, it seems, as having like a hardcore, full-on like 7-hour day with a bunch of younger kids as well, some of whom have behavioral problems. That's a stressful situation for all of you. How do you, in your own lives, handle your stress and balance your work and academic lives with doing these practicums, and how do you intend to do that moving forward once you're teachers? So
a large part, what I'm going to state from here on out, is not gathered from my own experience, but is gathered through other experiences of teachers that I've talked to that are further ahead in the profession than I am. And from what I've relatively gathered is that for the first few years of teaching as an educator, it's going to kind of suck. You're going to be gathering resources, you're going to be building materials from scratch, you're going to be doing all these things that you need to get done, you're going to be giving those building blocks and building experience, most importantly, to get yourself to a competent level where you are ready to be able to teach consistently and confidently. And for that first little while, it's kind of finding your foothold and panicking and doing a lot more work than you necessarily need to. But after that, you kind of find your stride and you find that methodology that you're comfortable with. You've tested around, you've continued to improve, and then you're able to kind of progress forward as a person and a teacher. But not to say that there's no opportunity to relax and unwind and have fun, but you need to be willing to put that like first little bit of struggle in to learn properly, because it's nice going to VIU and learning classes, but pedagogy can only get you so far. And to a certain extent, you need to do trial and error actually out with the experiences.
You got to remember, like, it's a people's profession, right? Like, and people are taxing. School is tiring. Doing an unpaid practicum is a huge stressor for a lot of people. And yeah, I wish you could see the face there. I feel that.
Allaina's making big faces.
I mean, 4th year, you're doing it wasn't that long ago. It's a 2-week and a 10-week practicum, or
2 week and a 6-week.
Yeah, so you're, 4th year, you're doing 8 weeks of practicum unpaid.
Well, actually 9, because you do 1 week in October and then 2 in November and then 6 in the spring.
Yeah. There you go. So, you're unpaid, which is and then you go into 5th year and we're doing, I think, collectively 14 weeks of unpaid practicum. And I mean, that's a big thing. And I think it's worth mentioning. I want to bring it up because, it is something we all talk about, especially in this day and age. Life is expensive. Life is stressful. So that's an added layer, Personally, it's stressful. You're tired. You're also doing school. You're also dealing with people's kids, and you're trying to keep yourself afloat. So like I said, just coming back to this is a people's profession. Like, I have tried personally to remind myself, like, lean on your people, right? Allan and I, last semester, things happen and you forget certain things or you need a hand, and you share resources. Don't make yourself more work than you have to, right? Like, you can try and be prepared as much as you can, but like people change, plans change, ideas change. Class doesn't go how you expect it to. You forget something. Have grace with yourself. I try and have as much grace with myself as possible. I'm one person. I get my sleep when I can. I try and make sure, put the book away, go to bed at a certain time, make sure I'm getting my sleep because that's a big thing. And then, just leaning on your people. Ask for help, ask for those resources, talk to someone if you need to, speak to your supervisor, speak to your host teacher. And we don't all get the best experience with our practicums. And that's unfortunately life. Learning, funny enough, being in school still, we don't have all the answers, right? We're all people's profession. You got to have a little bit of grace with yourself and just remember that we're still learning. And
To add a small smidge into what Olivia said there, I think a lot more now than ever in the teaching profession, teachers are working collaboratively to make a classroom work. Like you go up to any teacher and ask them like, hey, I'm doing XYZ in this classroom. And they will just give you every single resource that they have immediately, just pile it upon you. And it's like, here's everything I've taught with this. Use this as you will, adapt it, change it, whatever. And I'm finding that collaborative aspect between teachers is getting a lot bigger as we are progressing into the new curriculum, where people can like lean on each other and lean on other professionals that you work with and people who either may have more experience in a certain subject or just more experience overall.
It is important to use all the resources that are available to you, especially even online. We had recently, our fourth years had a seminar with a bunch of the year fives giving us like insight on how to go through our year four practicums. And one of them said, steal everything that you can. So use all internet resources that are available to you for lesson planning, because lesson planning is a big deal. I mean, I don't really have all that much practicum experience yet, but I'm already finding it so difficult to balance like my job. I'm a manager at a daycare at a school, which is also a lot of time and a lot of paperwork. So, I mean, I think I'm still kind of navigating that myself, but I also think it's important to focus on adaptability. I think that's a really big thing for a lot of teachers. I actually taught my first lesson today.
Congratulations.
It was scary, but it went well. But it's important to know that no matter what you think, no matter how you think it's going to go, it's going to go in the opposite direction. And it's hard to anticipate where your lesson will diverge or where it's going to go well. So it's important that you keep in mind that you are working for the kids, not for yourself. And you're doing what needs to be done for them. Because it sucks that your lesson plan could go half out the window, no one could pay attention, but you do it anyway and you try to work around it.
Yeah, you got to remember to be doing stuff for you, right? You can't do what you need to do for those children, those students, unless you're doing what you need to do to take care of yourself at the end of the day. And I think self-care has been a huge thing. We've had a lot of discussions in year 5 about self-care. And I'm sure you will as well after year 4 practicum, because it gets real. But you just got to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's so nice that like the year 5s get to send this like feedback to the year 4s and this like continuous loop of like, here's the gold of what you need to know. Like what kind of advice would you give now other than what you've given really already? I guess this podcast is kind of just advice for younger people in these programs, right? Like, is there any particular advice that you'd want to throw out there?
Don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
My host teacher on my last practicum said that to me, is that you're attempting to reinvent the wheel. Don't do that. You lean on other people. Use resources, as it was said, steal everything you can and use that to the best of your abilities. So like if you're focusing all your energy on making things from scratch that you don't necessarily need to be doing, you're not spending the time getting to know your class. You're not spending the time like practicing even just self-care. You're not spending the time doing what you need to do in other aspects of the career. So just do what you can with the resources that you have available and make sure that you're doing the best with what you have.
I think it's really easy for us to get caught up on the negatives and the things that aren't going the way that you had predicted or hoped that they would have. Like I just got placed in a practicum that I'm stoked about, but it's not what I was expecting. And it's out of our control. Placements, how the classes are run, who teaches them, when they're taught, where they're taught, how they're taught. But just letting go of the reins and remembering that every experience in this program is a learning experience, whether it's a good one or a bad one. And that's, we've just got to build on those and take it with stride. And I think that that's one thing I've learned in the profession as well in my early years is things don't go the way that you're going to expect them to. And you got to be ready to just kind of roll with the punches and try and find the positive in what you can, because otherwise it'll eat you alive.
Also, a little off topic, but what I've been realizing a lot is that AI is a fantastic resource, which is going to sound like so hypocritical as an educator.
Preach.
But AI is a fantastic resource for lesson planning, because like some of those lesson planning templates that you get from professors who want a full lesson plan built, they're extensive. They take a long time, hours to put the thought into it that you want the lesson to come out of. And again, no lesson's going to be perfect. But if you use AI and you know how to use AI responsibly and to kind of vet what you've asked the AI to do for you, it's so much easier. And it's so much quicker.
Work smarter, not harder.
Yep.
How do you think AI, both from a perspective of like a teacher receiving work from students, particularly in these lower grades, like we talk about in university, we talk a lot about AI usage in university classes. I think that's a very different context than kids using AI and gaining literacy in AI at a younger age, because these are skills we're going to need kids to have, like you're talking about, this ability to responsibly use AI with intention, with understanding when it can hallucinate and like how it actually works. Like how can those skills be developed? Like what are you guys looking at? What can you do?
I actually recently did a unit on this for the tech class that you take in fourth year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I actually it was actually kind of hilarious. My professor had us watch a bunch of videos that someone else did about AI. I thought it was so funny that we didn't actually have to be in class for the AI class, and how the videos were just like our entire perception and like what we were learning on it. And then we did our own self-directed activity. But one thing that they really stressed in those videos was teaching how to use AI, because especially in the higher grades, you're not going to be able to tell when students are using AI. Like, they mentioned that it's important to do work that can be done by AI in classrooms so that you can see it happening. But I think like the really important part of it is just to teach AI literacy before students find out on their own what AI is and what it can do for them. Saying like, the AI could tell you that 2 + 2 is 5, and you wouldn't know the difference if you didn't know that yourself.
Yeah, because like when I see people using AI at this point, I'm seeing people use a new tool like they've just discovered the newest pencil, right? This is a tool everybody in society is going to be using in some aspect or ratio, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big topic. It's a really cool topic. I personally love AI. I've had experiences with other, professionals or other people in the profession that they don't like it. I've done pro D-Day sessions on the use of AI and trying to decipher, and sometimes you can tell. Sometimes you can tell when they're using AI. But I think like we're saying here, like it is a part of, our world. It is a part of what, the kids are going to be using. It is a tool, right? Once upon a time we had to use an analog clock, and now kids don't even know how to read one sometimes, right? We're not going to expect a kid to tell the time by reading a sundial. It's becoming that, it's becoming that prevalent, right? Like people are using AI. And I think, like you said, like, giving students the opportunity to learn how to use it is not a bad thing. Helping shape those minds to inquire about what AI is telling you, I think is important. Because I've used it lots, and you reread what it says. And if you're able to look at that and say, that's right, that's not right, oh, I can use this, I can expand on this, it can be a really helpful tool. and, you know, I kind of chatted with some students in my year 4 practicum about how they use it, how we can use it. If you're stumped, maybe we can look at it this way. But it's a really fun tool as well. And I think you can get really creative with AI. You know, you can get certain characters to narrate something in a certain way. And it's, I think, you know, looking at that engagement piece and the relevancy piece as well for students it is what's relevant. And it will be moving forward. So I'm personally of the mindset that I'm all for it, but we need to be giving students the knowledge to actually use it in a positive way, right?
It's a fantastic way to teach critical thinking, which is a huge part of the core curriculum.
Yeah, it's so important for AI.
Plus, you can make really cool images. Really wacky.
There's so many, you said creative stuff, and there's like so many creative things you can do with AI, and it's just going to get a wider variety of stuff too.
I take more of an apprehensive take towards AI. I definitely welcome its usage for like building resources and such. But I think first and foremost, it's a tool, not a miracle cure. And I think that's something that we need to focus quite heavily on, especially as teachers, if we're using it in the classroom or we're helping students use it in the classroom. It's a tool to get you to the end point. It's not the solution to the end point. It's not going to be the miracle Band-Aid that you can slap on all of your poorly written essays to get things done.
Yeah, that's really well said.
It's that's I think the key distinction that we need to be bringing into the classroom as teachers is that you can use this, feel free, as long as you use it responsibly and use it as a tool and not doing all the work for you. If you work in conjunction with it, it can do a lot more than a person could do on an individual scale and could do it a lot faster. But it's not going to be able to completely replicate that human element that we want to keep and preserve, I feel at least. I think with students, that's where we want to do it. For teachers, I have to say it's quite wonderful for specifically writing some of the more tedious documents that you don't necessarily need to write. Everybody's seen like a course outline or a rubric, and you can have an AI whip it up for you and save you many hours of writing it yourself. I saw somebody online using an AI to like simulate narrate conversations with dead people and have them like talk to like Napoleon or whatever.
I saw this. It's so cool.
That's so interesting.
That's a great learning tool.
But then, like, obviously the validity of it and whatnot comes into question, but it's a very unique learning tool and it can be used to make really memorable and creative learning experiences. And I find, especially going back towards my philosophy of like engagement, students aren't going to care about like the 150th worksheet that they've done. But if they got to like do a class where they talk to Napoleon or whatever, they're going to remember that. It's going to be memorable and that learning is going to stick with them. Even if they don't remember the finer details, they're going to remember at least the core message that came across from it.
Yeah, it's about balance, right? Like anything, too much of something's it's not going to do you any favors. So striking that balance between it being useful and being a detriment to their learning.
If you had all the resources and time you needed, what is a problem or something you'd like to change about the education system, and that's going to be like related to your job? What's something that if you had the time and resources you would change or fix, and what would it look like if you did that, do you think?
Fireworks are going off inside my brain right now. Little ideas, just pew pew, so much.
I think coming into the profession at the time that we're coming in is, especially in BC, we got hit with a perfect storm of a changing of curriculum as well as COVID. And we're seeing a lot of issues coming in, at least I experienced in my practicum. I don't know if this is a universal experience, where students are struggling. And it's hard to say if it's like changes that haven't necessarily been working for students, if it was COVID, if it was anything. And I don't think we're going to be able to tell until after COVID. And it makes it really hard for at least me when I'm looking at it to see what specifically isn't working. But I can tell one thing that isn't working is we need more EAs. And
that was the first thing that popped into my head.
First thing for me too. Pay EAs more.
Pay EAs more. And this is going to come as a bias if you're like, oh, but EAs will be making more close to teachers. Pay teachers more too.
Yep.
Like, we're having a really big struggle where a very large school has 7 EAs to share. I'm not going to name specifics, but it was a school of around like over 1,000 students and 7 EAs to share for the whole school.
1,700 students plus. There's 7 EAs for the school. So for those 1,700 students, 2 of which are permanently assigned to a specific program. So for 1,700 students, there is 5 EAs. So education assistants, these are people that will help those students that do have their IEP, so their individual education plans, they need more assistance. So 5 for 1,700 students. And that's not enough.
I personally find that ridiculous. Some students can eat an enormous amount of class time up, and some students need specific individualized care. It's no fault of the students, and it's no fault of the school system as a whole, but some students need more one-on-one work, need somebody to be there with them to help them out. Yeah. And we are unable, as it currently stands with the system that is in place and the money that we are giving out. There's not enough people, not enough desire to become an EA, and there's not enough EAs out there to help those students that have that need.
Yeah. There's no incentive, and like you said earlier, Allan, this is where a lot of students are slipping through the cracks, I think is how you put it. Because there's just not the support, and there's no incentive for people to want to, get into that job when you're getting paid, to put it frank, really crap wages for really, high demanding work.
EAs are also so mistreated in the district as a whole. Like, I have a very good friend of mine who is an EA, and I also should mention that in my cohort of about 34 people, I think 6 or 7 of them are EAs getting teaching degrees because they cannot make a living wage off what they have currently. But anyway, I have a very close friend who is an EA, and he told me that at the end of every year, every EA contract goes up in the air, and then you get to choose or apply for a job based on how much seniority you have. You don't get to stay with the same student every year despite that student possibly having a very good relationship with you and you working well with them, because someone else with more seniority could take that job at the end of the year. Sometimes EAs don't get full-time contracts. Their EAs are like freaking gold in this district. There's never enough of them. The class that I'm in for kindergarten, there's 20 children in the classroom, and we could use like 5 EAs. And there's one who has to do the job of 4 or 5 EAs, like constantly chasing and like helping where they can. And because we don't have enough EAs in this district, there is less of a want to be an EA, because then you are doing the work of 5 people.
To answer your question in a broad stroke, if I had all the money, obviously I would pay teachers better. I would incentivize people to want to join the profession, whether it's an EA or a teacher or in any other capacity, right? But especially, we need EAs, and I would really incentivize that. If we can incentivize other professions, I'm talking financially, why not educators, right? And that goes for pre-service teachers. 3 of them sitting right here, and we've already talked about it. I would make our practicum a co-op, right? Give us the opportunity to take off one of those stresses. We're essentially, and I know for a lot of us, just given the reins, and we are teaching, right? We are taking weeks of classroom time, and we are responsible to teach. I guess technically we are not responsible, but we are teaching. And I think giving some financial supports and making this a paid practicum, if I had all the money, if I had, the power, I'd pay our pre-service teachers some money.
Especially because those student loans are not very fun to pay off.
No.
No, they are not.
No, and especially when you have to live in a city that's as expensive as Nanaimo, you have to pay rent, so you have to have a job. And with the way the practicum works out and the way your classes work out, that's like freaking impossible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think too, if we had, if the BC Ministry of Education had more supports in the school, it would give teachers and other faculty more time on their hands to actually be able to dedicate to other things going on in student life in school, to your own interests. But I think I would be hopeful that with more supports that you could actually take some more time to be involved, be part of the school, rather than feeling what I think a lot of people have voiced is that, weight of there's so much to do and so little time, so little support, so little funding. Hopefully, if we had the money, if we had the supports, you could provide more outreach for students at risk. There's so many things I think that could be done if there was more funding, more money. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like it's not the only fix, but I do think that it would give opportunities in other spaces to create space for, more inclusive spaces, more supports for students. It could create so much more equity in the school system, in our classes, in our schools in general, in our districts. for students and faculty across the board. But yeah.
There's a clear lack in a lot of different things in terms of monetary need. In one of the areas that I was on my practicum for, we had, for the entire department that I was a part of, for about 5 to 6 teachers, $255 to share for the entire department for the year as funding. And that is for all posters, classroom materials, textbooks, everything. And you're able to hold that money and have it carry over. But if you hold on to that money for a few years, you have enough for maybe a class set of textbooks that are probably going to be outdated in a few years. You have enough for a few resources, a couple posters, maybe an interactive field trip or a lesson. But a lot of the funding isn't there for the need that is there. And it's hard. It's sad to say that in the perfect world, we'd have a lot more money being poured into education, but unfortunately, that's just what it is. There's just not enough money in education right now, and things are suffering because of it, unfortunately.
Especially in the younger grades, one of the things that's it's important to have a lot of things in your classroom. You know, you need toys for the kids for debrief sessions. You need decoration, because I find that kids really enjoy, like, you know, seeing a fun, bright classroom. And when you're a teacher, most of that comes out of your pocket. Like, if you have, like, building toys in your room, you probably paid for them yourself, because the district does not provide you with those funds to fill your classroom with what the kids need. I also think that in a perfect world, we would, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong if this is a bad idea, we would have reduced class sizes, because
Amen, sister.
20 kids, 20 kindergartners in a room is a lot to pay attention to, especially because, like, they're formative years when it's so easy for them to start off behind. And when you're in kindergarten, it's important to get your foundations, like kindergarten I speak in kindergarten because I'm in a practicum right now for kindergarten, but in those younger years, all of them, it's important to start building your foundations. But then many kids who have just slipped through the cracks, like Allan was speaking about earlier, come to high school because they didn't get enough attention. They weren't, like, no one had the opportunity to properly assess their work or guide them, help them in any way that they could, because there's 20 kindergartners in a room. 5 of them have undiagnosed disabilities. It's hard to spread your attention between that many children.
Reduced class sizes would play a massive role, because especially with some students will eat up more class time than other students. And each student has their own needs, and there needs to be certain accommodations meant for that. But as a teacher, I found myself ping-ponging around between, like, the same, like, 6 or 7 students. And I would be more capable of helping them if I had a smaller class size. I could be more capable of doing the work that I need to do to assist every individual student. But when you have, like, 20 to 30 students crammed into a room, it's really easy for one or two kids just to fall through. And it's hard. Again, it always comes back to money, but being an issue, but that would be the next major step besides more EAs that I would include in the classroom, is just reducing the class sizes.
We gotta look into what the funding looks like for each individual student this year, which is something new I don't think we've really talked about thus far in the program, which is, like, particularly how much each student gets as funding going in, that the Ministry of Education gives a school per student enrolled. And that funding only goes up for very specific designations of students. And when I say designations, I'm talking about people that have an IEP or specifically, like, a disability. So there's very specific disabilities that they look for in order to give extra funding for those students. And a lot of the ones that are really common that they do give cause for, needs for extra support, like ADHD, dyslexia, those don't count, right? So kids that need extra supports, and I say more commonly because I'm not sure if you would say I was wrong by saying common, but I do think ADHD and dyslexia and behavioral issues are quite common. And I would say maybe even increasingly, because we're becoming more aware of these ways of learning, ways of being, of just people, right? Like, before you'd say, like, that's a hyperactive kid, I guess is what I'm trying to get to the point of, but there's a diagnosis to be aware of at some point, right? But we're figuring that out. But those things aren't funded properly, right? Getting to see that breakdown of how much students are, I'm going to say, worth in the eyes of the ministry is a little bit shocking and a little bit disappointing. And it comes back down to wishing we had more money so that we could support these students and support our teachers and the communities. Because in the end of the day, like these are communities, right? Like we're spending like pretty much our lives, like a better of 8 hours in school of some sort, right? Like whether it's at home or
Half of your waking day.
yeah, exactly, right? So like you think that we would be able to fund this, and almost every I know you said that you're homeschooled. You're still schooling, right? But every child, hopefully, is going through the education system. And I just think that it's such a strong foundation that we need to make sure that we're supporting these children so that they can grow up to be informed individuals, so that they can think about where they want to go in life. They can, I'm a first generation university student myself, and like it just goes to think of like maybe if certain people in my family before me had better access to education or better access to supports, like maybe there could have been some more university students in my family, right? Like you just never know, and being able to have the opportunity to give those supports I think would just be pivotal.
Thank you so much for coming, everybody. This was an awesome conversation to have. I had a great time, and I'm just gonna pretty much end it here. But if you guys just want to give me a goodbye to the Navigator, that'd be awesome.
Thanks for having us for my first podcast, at least. That was felt like I was on my soapbox a little bit there, but
I know
it's super fun.
Also, first time on a podcast, and I sit on the soapbox proudly.
It's nice to be able to be a part of something, and honestly, just having this conversation has been wonderful. And honestly, it's nice to be part of not only the education community, but having the opportunity to be a bit of a part of the VIU community as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This has been a great opportunity for me to not only help build a big old soapbox for you three, but also just super educational. There's a lot of double entendres going on with the education students being educated, and I'm educating people, and I'm getting educated by you guys. So this has been really interesting to find those different distinctions and seeing just how much goes into thinking about being a teacher. Holy. So thank you guys for taking on this profession, because I think it's super important, and I'm so glad you could all come here and tell me and tell the world, hopefully, about what we need. All right, guys, that's all I have for now.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.